Football Podcast.
Touchdown Ram! Recovered by the Chargers. Touchdown UCLA!
With USC great and NFL stud, Frosty Rucker.
The Trojans back in front!
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dyrud, here on the LA Football Network, always on the Believe Podcast Network. Thank you for joining me on a Wednesday here in Los Angeles. Still a bit under the weather. Your boy's getting out of it. Not sure if it's COVID or not, but, we're the Dyrud family is just hanging out, getting our stuff done here at home. So, everyone stay safe out there. Be well, but we're all good. Just drinking a lot of tea, a lot of whiskey. Can't go wrong with that, right? Is that considered adulting when your whiskey is your remedy? I don't know, but I think it works for me. Feeling better. But yeah, got a great show for you today. Great week. It is Raiders week for the Chargers. It is Niners week for the Rams. Two of the best rivalries in all of sports. And they culminate on the same week to wrap up week 18 of the regular season with playoff implications. Are you kidding me? What a way to end the season. What a way. Couldn't be more like a better script. Couldn't be written any better than what we're about to see. Today's show going to be focused more on our Rams, as I invite in a great guest. Got to know him a little bit. Buddy of mine now. His name's Jessie Naylor. He does the Last Second Sports YouTube channel and also a writer for All 49ers SI, Sports Illustrated. So, going behind enemy territory, come in talking all things Jimmy G, Kyle Shanahan, Nick Bosa, the rivalry that is Rams and Niners. So we're going to get all into that. Today's show brought to you by our friends over at TickPick. If you need tickets to anything, not just a game, but obviously this is a football show. So if you're going to the Chargers Raider game in Las Vegas, if you're going to the Rams game or you want to go to the Rams game at SoFi and don't have tickets yet, go to tickpick.com/LAFB. That's tick.pick.com/LAFB, and you will get zero fees. So the price you see on there is the price you get, just like StubHub and Ticketmaster, but those two sites add fees at the end. You're not going to get that at tickpick.com/LAFB. But they also, like I said, not just game tickets, they got entertainment events. If you're into concerts, stuff like that, make sure to go there. Tickpick.com/LAFB. Get your tickets today. All right. Hope everyone is doing well, having a blessed week thus far. Like I said, great interview here. Rams fans, Chargers fans, for tuning in. Hey, love you to stick around. But we will have a more Chargers Raiders focused show on Friday as we preview that huge game that winner take all go to the playoffs. But first, let's get into this matchup. Rams Niners. Here's my guy, Jessie Naylor. Rams Nation, what's going on? We got a huge one this week to wrap up the season. It's Niners week, one of my favorite weeks of the entire season, round 2. We have my boy on, I think it was before the season started, actually, when we first connected and did a live show together and kind of broke down where these two teams were. We talked about where we thought these teams would finish. So maybe we can get into how those how that unfolded. I can't even remember exactly our thoughts. We'll try to get into it. But Jessie Naylor, my man, writes for All 49ers SI, also has his own YouTube channel, Last Second Sports, that went under and he brought it back to life, and it's bigger and better than ever. Congrats on that. Jessie, my man, what's going on? Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I am so happy that we're able to do this again. And yeah, we talked preseason. I remember my predictions. I was not high on the Rams. They have done a fantastic job this year for sure. As the season's gone along, we'll talk about the first matchup and stuff, but I thought the 49ers would lose that first matchup. You and I were unable to link up for it, but I do remember hitting you in the DMs. I was like, I did not expect that at all. So it's always fun when the 49ers and Rams get together. Week 17, there's so much on the line. You guys are fighting for a home game and division win. The 49ers are fighting just to get into the playoffs. It's going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you, my man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I didn't even give you the proper shout out though, the Tim Tebow lookalike, because that will always stick with me, and it's shocking you don't get that more, especially being down in Florida. But
What's
yeah,
funny about that, Ryan, is you were the first one to say it, and since then, I've at least 10 times people were like, "Oh, you look like Tim Tebow." I'm like, nobody ever said that until Ryan said it.
maybe it's the hat too. Maybe if you don't wear a hat normally, you look different, but with the
Yeah,
hat
yeah,
for
maybe
sure.
that's it. Actually, it's probably worse because I've got the hard part with the slicked over hair, so
Oh, so for
probably
sure.
even worse. Yeah.
Yeah, you're built for the SEC network there. Um, but yeah, man, I think if I remember right, just looking back at when we talked, neither of us had the Cardinals making the playoffs, if I remember correct. Or did you? Maybe you did. I think I was
I
pretty low on
did.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. So my predictions were as follows. I actually said that all four teams from the West would make the playoffs.
That's
I
right.
said that the Cardinals would finish second, the 49ers would finish first, Rams third, I believe, and Seattle fourth. I might have had those last two flipped, but
Mhm.
I did have all four teams making the playoffs. So was definitely wrong on the order, was definitely wrong on all four teams. But Arizona still might finish second. So I'm going to go with
There
that
you
one and
go.
write it out.
Yeah, you're holding firm on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had Rams 1, I think I had Niners 2,
Mhm.
Seahawks 3, Arizona 4, if I remember correctly. But either way, let's start with this because I know we talked about coaching too, because obviously these two coaches go hand in hand. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. We talked, and I still believe this. I think overall, just based on what we've seen in these 5 seasons that they've coached, I think Sean McVay has been the better coach overall. But head to head, it's zero doubt Kyle Shanahan's been the better coach head to head. Why do you think that is? We talk all day about on the Rams side why that is, but why from the Niners side has Kyle Shanahan been so great against these Rams?
Yeah, I just think it's like the big brother syndrome, right? I mean, he basically learned from Kyle and that coaching tree, and it's like the rule says, you're willing to give everything you have almost, and you leave a little bit in your back pocket when you're teaching. And I feel like that's what it is. I think that there's something to be said for being the big brother in a relationship, right? And
Mhm.
again, it does not mean at all that he's the better coach. In fact, I've ripped Shanahan on multiple cases. I think Shanahan has way too much on his plate. If Shanahan was just simply a head coach, then I think he would be much better. But he makes a lot of the personnel decisions. He has his hands fully in the draft. And I know that all coaches do to a certain extent, but I also think that the Rams really trust what's it, Les Snead over there. I
Yeah.
think they trust him to make those decisions. In the very end, it's up to him. I'm sure he consults with McVay, but McVay is not the end all be all. In San Francisco, Shanahan is the end all be all. And I think for anybody that is not the hoodie over in Boston, it's just too much to handle, especially for a first time head coach. So, you know, that's as far as who's the better head coach. I'll hear the argument that McVay is. His record certainly says he is. I like his leadership style
Mhm.
above all a little bit more than I like Shanahan's. I think he's a little bit more personable. If I was a player, I would like his style a lot more. But for whatever reason, and the reason for me is the big brother thing. It is what it is, as Jimmy Garoppolo would say.
Which we'll get to plenty of that here in a minute. But yeah, it's a good point. I think Sean McVay has kind of learned on that too, because there has been times when he has had too much control. When he first came over, he brought Wade Phillips to say, "Hey, I need someone that knows more than I know," which I think was one of his best moves ever when he became a head coach, because he let Wade, A, who's been in the league for 40 years, and B, had been a head coach, kind of do things where I don't think Kyle really had that when he first started out up in San Francisco, and he had a brand new GM at the same time. Whereas Sean had Les, who had been here already 5 or 6 years, dating back to the St. Louis days. So I think that helped. I think Sean does have a lot of say in personnel, but he does empower Les to make the final say, like you said. Like Sean will say, "Hey, I want this guy, make it happen," and then he'll go back and do his thing, and then let Les work his magic. Whereas it sounds like Kyle is much more involved in the process of making that happen, which is just hard to do for anyone. I mean, these guys already work 100 hours a week. There's only so many hours in a day. And so I've been very vocal about Kyle. I think he's a very, very good head coach. I've just been honest that I don't think he deserves the credit he's gotten, but phenomenal offensive mind. He always seems to deal with injuries and still gets his guys to compete and play. And he's brought this team now to a 9-7 record when it looked like they were down and out early on. before we get to the matchup the first time, that'll lead us into the matchup this time. What changed? Because they were sitting at 3-5, I think, or something around there. Like pretty bad. Looked like the season was basically over. Now you're at 9-7, and they're a team that no one wants to play because they're playing so good.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just continuity on offense. It's really weird. So for as big of a genius as Kyle Shanahan is, I feel like he overthinks things sometimes. And
On too.
I really felt like that. I felt like he wasn't in his bag when it came to play calling. I go back and I watch film every game and try to break things down. And for me, there were spurts where I would say, oh, he's in his bag this drive, or he's in his bag this quarter. But I really couldn't say that for a full game until it reached the Chicago game. I mean, we're talking like 7, 8 weeks into the season. That's really what it is. And then you have Kittle in and out of the lineup. You have, let's see, Debo missed a game. Ayuk was in the quote unquote doghouse. There was just a lot of moving pieces. And I think the expectations were high. They had a lot of injuries right away to key players that to start things off. Shanahan's not in his bag. There was a lot of things that went into it, Ryan. There really was. But I would say right now, it's the offense continuity on that side, Shanahan being in his bag, being comfortable, and just having their playmakers on the field has really helped them turn the corner.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, Kittle, obviously, we know how great he is, and he's been, I don't want to say up and down, but like you said, just been in and out of the lineup, so haven't really gotten that rhythm. Debo, who was the guy who destroyed the Rams in the first matchup, just so good in space. You could argue top 5 receiver in the league. It'd be hard not to with how well he is with the football in his hands. And it seems like they're really getting rolling. And with that team, no matter who's at running back, they're always successful. They always have a guy injured, but they always have success. But what leads to the quarterback, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, and we'll get into it later. But let's at least bring it up now. I know you from following Twitter and your stance, and I agree with you. Just so you know, on your opinion on Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. Is it okay? So Trey Lance started last week, obviously, because of the injured thumb to Jimmy Garoppolo. So I guess 2-part question: A, do you think Jimmy's starting this week against the Rams? And B, has Trey matured slower than you have thought, and that's why he hasn't started? Or has Jimmy just been the safe play, and that's why Shanahan has gone with him all year?
Okay, so
Loaded question.
It is a loaded question. It is a loaded question. So do I think that Jimmy plays this weekend? No, I don't. His thumb is injured. It's going to require surgery. Drew Brees, who's one of the toughest customers to ever play quarterback, played with like 6 broken ribs last year. He had the same injury and he had to have surgery and missed multiple weeks in 2019. So to think that Jimmy's going to miraculously, after an extra 7 days, still needing surgery, be good enough to go out there and play, I would be shocked if that happens. As far as Lance goes, he hasn't progressed slower than what I thought. It just came down to playing time for him. He needs playing time. This is a kid that 21 years old, just turned, by the way, and didn't play at all really that final year in college. He had one basically showcase game. That was it. He just hasn't had a lot of football, and he needs to play. As far as why he hasn't played, Shanahan. I mean, Shanahan expects perfection. He cannot stand Jimmy G. Like, you see it on the sidelines. He freaks out on a regular basis. He blows up in him. There was a report that came out in the Chicago game right before halftime. He wasn't playing well. He pulls Jimmy aside and says, "This is simple blank. Can you handle it?" Basically saying, if you don't go out there this drive and make it happen, I'm pulling you. We're going with the kid. He can't stand Jimmy. Yet Jimmy, I will say this, knows the offense. He's on time with his throws. I'm sure that Trey Lance, for as big time as he can be and as big time as he showed to be in certain spots in that game, even me watching the film with a novice eye is looking at it saying, hold on a second. He had an open guy here. He passed that up, scrambled around. The result was great. He got a first down, but he missed the open receiver. And I know Shanahan expects perfection. He wants you to go to the open receiver that he draws up and dials up on that play. And I'm sure he's ripping Trey in the film room for it. So I think that's why he's chose to go with Jimmy, just based off the timing of the offense. It was absolutely the wrong move, 100%. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I know you said you agree with me on the Lance thing, but that being said, as a Rams, somebody who covers the Rams, do you think Rams fans are more scared of Jimmy this Sunday or more scared of Trey Lance playing? What do you think they would rather not see?
Oh, Trey Lance, 100%. Jimmy G has actually, I feel like, played pretty well against the Rams in his career with the Niners, but they haven't won because of Jimmy G. They've usually won because the Niners defense has just balled out. The running game has balled out. Like the Rams defense has not been able to stop the running game. And quarterback play by the Rams, whether it was Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford last time, has just been horrendous. So as good as Jimmy G's played, he hasn't been the reason why they've won. Whereas Trey Lance, there's so much unknown that that's where that fear comes in. Like a mobile quarterback, a big arm. We've only seen him play like 6 or 7 quarters total this whole season, minus just a few random like trick plays that they've thrown him in there. So to answer your question, I think definitely Rams fans are hoping they see Jimmy G out there with a bum thumb suit up for sure.
I'm sure of it. And this was, I just did a show right before I came over and somebody had posted that in the chat and I said, well, let me ask because I'm actually going on our Rams podcast next. I'll just ask the question because I'm sure that it's talked about. Sure, the forums are talking about it, wondering who's going to play. Who would you rather see play? So I figured that would be the case, but I'm glad that there was confirmation.
Well, Jesse, it's funny. It's funny the parallels between these two teams, at least kind of if you compare 2020 Rams to 2021 Niners, the parallels are insane because you look at the Rams. Rams had a better record last year at this point than the Niners do, but they're vying for a better playoff spot or just a playoff spot in general. Jared Goff gets hurt the second to last week of the season, injures his right thumb. I think he fractured it. There wasn't a torn ligament like Jimmy's, but had a fractured thumb. Missed the next week. The season finale was only 16 or 17 weeks back then against Arizona. John Walford goes in, plays well. Rams win. Rams fans are all surrounded around John Walford. I went on a Seahawks show because they played the Seahawks in week 1. Asked them the same question. Who would you rather see this week, an injured Jared Goff or an unknown John Walford? And they said, well, we know what Jared Goff can do. Bring us Jared Goff. We know we can play him well. We know his thumb is hurt. And we all know what happened that game. Jared ends up coming in. So it's funny now the Niners are in the same boat with their longtime quarterback that is on his way out anyway, kind of like Jared Goff was in a sense among Rams fans. And here we are asking the same question. So crazy the parallels.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And you're exactly right. It is a dead parallel to what we saw with the Rams last year. That's actually crazy that you bring that up.
Yeah, insane. So we see that a lot throughout the NFL, different parallels and storylines that somehow end up matching up. So if Trey Lance starts this week, regardless of outcome, obviously, if they lose, that might be the end of their season. And if they win, they would go on. So regardless of outcome, do you think that will be the last time we see Jimmy Garoppolo in a Niner uniform?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Whenever this season ends, it's over for Jimmy. They've got to trade him. They know what the future holds. They keep saying, well, we don't know for sure. And
of course,
you basically have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster and you're trying to sell him to another team, right?
Yeah.
You're in the middle of trying to sell him to another team. When he plays well, you're going to pump him up. When he doesn't play well, in the past, Shanahan would rip him. He hasn't done that this season. It's always, well, we could have done better here. It wasn't all Jimmy. He's always said the right thing this year. And I find that interesting that all of a sudden he's in Jimmy's corner every time it comes to a press conference because Shanahan is he won't make qualms about it. He will tell you if the quarterback lost a game. He's done it in the past. He did it with Ryan. He's done it with Jimmy many times. But this year he has not done that. And that's because he's trying to sell him to another franchise. So, yes, it is over for Jimmy. He makes way too much money. The salary cap's not going up a ton. They have way too many free agents to just allow him to sit on this roster as a backup or to compete for the starting job. He has to be off the roster for sure.
Where I'm sure you've talked about it, but if not, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but just for the sake of conversation, where do you see a landing spot or where do you think they could get in return? Because I have a bunch of Niner friends, which is funny. I mean, LA, before the LA teams were here, a lot of people were Niner fans. So a lot of people here and we've talked and they, fans are always indifferent. They think, oh yeah, we're getting a first rounder or a second. I maybe think a little less. So I'd rather hear from you though. You know a lot more about the Garoppolo market than me. Where do you see him ending up and what for?
Yeah, I look at two teams that really catch my eye. One is Pittsburgh. Ben Roethlisberger is moving on. They have a very strong defense there. They're looking at it and saying, okay, Jimmy isn't amazing, but he's probably a slight upgrade over 55-year-old Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
We have the defense and the running game. We've seen him go to a Super Bowl with those things around him. They could rework the contract, make him a lot cheaper than what Ben was this year. So I look at Pittsburgh as a team. I also look at the Saints as a team. They had a quarterback in Drew Brees who did not have a strong arm at all, especially as it came down to the tail end of his career. And they were able to work around those limitations and still be a very, very good team. Playing in a dome, that would suit Jimmy very well. So those are two teams that I look at. As far as what he's worth, assuming that I'm right and he doesn't play ever again in a 49er uniform, I think he's probably going to go for a future fourth that could escalate to a third, depending on whatever incentives they want to put in, whether that's playing time, whether that's statistics, or both. Something like what you saw with the Rams and the Eagles, or excuse me, the Colts and the Eagles for Carson Wentz. That's how I see that going, but much less. Wentz went for a second that could escalate to a 1st. I see Jimmy going for a fourth that could escalate to a third.
I think that's fair just because there's still like the ceiling of potential Wentz, whereas we kind of know what Jimmy is and his ceiling. But the New Orleans is like a perfect fit to me. That system, like he would just fit so good because all that system predicates is quick passing and smart decision making. Like you don't have to like have a big arm. You don't have to be extremely athletic. You have leaking guys out of the backfield on every play. It's what the Chargers run now, but they've obviously added wrinkles because they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert. So they've adjusted a little bit, but yeah, I think that'd be a perfect fit. So that is interesting. But yeah, it'll be fun to see what the Niners, how they progress with Trey Lance, who I loved as a prospect. Covering the Rams is tough because that could be a really good quarterback we have to face for a long time now if it works out. Last thing on him, because I asked you why maybe he's not playing yet. In his maturation process that you've been able to see, do you think he's gotten ready? I know we talked about why you think Jimmy's starting and whatnot, but do you still believe he is the true great prospect that you saw, or are you having a few question marks there?
No questions at all. I thought he would be the pick. Everybody was saying Mac Jones. I thought it would be Trey Lance. Trey Lance was the guy. So very early on in the process, we're talking when the 49ers were still at the 12th pick. We were looking at quarterbacks, but we didn't know for sure what the 49ers were going to do. A lot of us thought they would go corner or offensive line. We didn't know what the 49ers were going to do. But looking at all the quarterbacks, I said that Trey Lance and Shanahan could be the biggest disaster. And I still believe that to a certain extent because I think that Shanahan, like I said earlier, is a perfectionist. And going with a guy like Trey Lance, who is he can run the offense, right? He can play from under center. He's smart, play action. He does all of those things, but he will also improvise. And when he does, I know that drives Kyle nuts. And that's not going to be something that gets fixed overnight. It's going to be something that is going to take time for him to get used to, learn what's open in the NFL, learn the NFL game. This is a 2 or 3 year thing until he's probably where Kyle wants him. So I think in that sense, it could be a disaster. On the flip side, though, I know everything that Trey Lance is. Extremely smart. I know what they did at North Dakota State to get him prepared. Within 2 weeks, they said he knew this offense. And I will tell you, there are plenty of quarterbacks that leave the Shanahan offense and say, what the hell? Most complicated thing I have ever ran across. I don't know what's going on over there. Lance had it in 2 weeks. So extremely smart. He is poised. Organized chaos is what I call it. Everything around him is chaotic. He seems to be calm. He uses a lot of I statements in the post game. That one was on me, right? To where even Jimmy still says a lot of we statements, even when he's asked a direct question like, what happened on that interception that was clearly your fault? Well, we. Yeah. Trey Lance is I. I think he's a great leader, intelligent, all the physical attributes. He's going to be great. I just don't know if it's going to be with or without Shanahan at this point.
Yeah. Rams fan need to be worried at the product of that, and that's interesting with or without Shanahan. Again, I keep asking these questions before we get to the preview, but it's just you lead me to them, so why not? Do you think Shanahan and John Lynch are a package deal, or is there a shot one goes and the other stays?
Well, I don't think they're necessarily a package deal. I said before the season, if the 49ers don't make the playoffs, that I thought Lynch would be fired.
Mm,
I still kind of believe that. I'm not positive on it just because the season was definitely a little strange, right? If they had continued to lose the way they were, there's no doubt about it. Lynch would have been gone. The way it played out, almost making the playoffs, or maybe they make the playoffs, whatever. But let's say they just narrowly miss it. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he doesn't get fired, but I could see a situation where Lynch goes, Shanahan stays, because again, Shanahan has all the power anyways. I mean, ultimately the buck stops with him.
yeah.
So he's just going to put in Adam Peters, promote him into that GM spot and roll with it that way. I could definitely see that situation playing out.
Hmm.
And we'll see what happens this offseason.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating for sure. But all right, Jess, let's get into this game. And let's first look at the first game because you, like you said, you messaged me like shocking what happened. I thought it was going to be a good game, but it was like, the Niners were sputtering at that point, 2-5 or 3-5, whatever they were. Rams were 7-2, had some big wins in there, had just beaten the Bucks like a few weeks prior. And Matthew Stafford was a MVP candidate or leading MVP candidate. And then, what is it? Second play of the game, throws a pick, but it was like, it was a deep ball punt, basically. It's like, okay, whatever, we'll get that out of our system. No, they never were able to get things going. The Niners, you guys ran the ball down our throats. We could not stop it for anything. That's when the fire Raheem Morris's started out here in Los Angeles, which I've talked many times. I still think it's ridiculous, but that's when it kind of really escalated. And you guys just absolutely dominated us 31-10. What did you do right or so well in that game? And how can you replicate that now in the final game of the season to get into the playoffs?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, yeah, I was shocked. You said you thought it would be a good game. I picked the 49ers to get blown out. I thought the Rams were going to hang 40 on their head. It was a disaster. I believe the Niners were 2-4 at that time. It did not look good whatsoever. They were in the middle of losing, I think it was 4 straight, something like that. Whatever it was, it wasn't good at that time. I'll say that. And I thought there was no way. I know that Shanahan's sons, McVay, everybody was saying it leading up. I'm like, listen, this is different. Stafford's there now. The whole thing has changed. Jimmy Ward put his money where his mouth was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the interview in the offseason, but my publisher over at 49ers Sports Illustrated, Grant Cohn, had him on his show in the offseason. And Ward talked a lot of trash about Matthew Stafford. Talked about how he wasn't a winner, how changing teams wouldn't matter, how he would get his hands on some. He wasn't afraid of, like, a lot. He talked a lot. And then so for him to come out and have not one, but 2 interceptions in that game, that right there got the team fired up. Then you had the run game. There was nothing that the Rams could do. And it seemed like they had no adjustments, no answers.
Yep.
Everything they did didn't work. And the 49ers just ran wild. And it's like an avalanche, right? When things start going downhill, it can get ugly. And that's what happened. It was just a couple quick turnovers. 49ers could run the ball at will. Things got ugly quick, and it snowballed on the Rams. I don't think it was any indication of who the better team is necessarily. If this game happens 10 times, I still think the Rams can probably win 6 of those. It's just the way that it worked out. It happens in the NFL. It can happen to anybody. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for the Rams, it happened to them that week.
Yeah, and I think that was a season-turning win for the Niners. It seemed like they really turned things around then. And, they were a Super Bowl favorite by a lot of people to start the year. So starting off so poorly was a bit of a real surprise. And then that was the win that was like, okay, here's another team. And you guys kind of got rolling. You were still a bit of a roller coaster overall, but that's when you saw, okay, this is a team that's talented. And with the Rams, that started the question marks like, okay, is this a team built on talent, but do they have the chemistry? Can they make the adjustments when it matters most? They corrected things a little bit. Then they went on a 3-game losing streak when those questions really escalated and everyone all of a sudden said they were like a terrible team, which I didn't believe, but now they've corrected and they've won 5 straight. So coming into this game, and the biggest critique I've had of this Rams team is that, and maybe Kyle does this in a way too, but our biggest critique of Sean McVay overall is he gets real pass happy. And I know Kyle's predicated more on the run than Sean is, but Sean McVay gets real pass savvy, especially now with Matthew Stafford. And there's times when they're averaging 6 yards a clip with Sony Michel, and then we'll just see 6 straight passes. And it's like, what are you doing? The run's working. And it just really throws things off. And if we do have an interception in there, then we get 2, and it just throws the whole offense out of sync. So that kind of leading up to my question, this Niners defense now, whatever, 10 games removed from when they saw each other last, what is the strength of this defense? Obviously, we know they have a great pass rush. They have good secondary guys, but I think they have some guys in the COVID protocols, which horrible timing for you there. But what's the strength, and what should we expect this Rams team to see on Sunday?
Yeah, one thing too that I want to throw out that was a really big deal. I get it. Every team deals with injuries. I understand all of that. If I remember correctly, that was OBJ's first game with the Rams. Think about it even been Von Miller's first game. And Woods went out on like Friday with his torn, was it Achilles or ACL?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Excuse me. This was during our 3-game losing streak. I said, yeah, that was during. Yeah. Woods went out prior to that game. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like Friday. It was like 2 days before. And Woods, he helps the run game a lot. He's a really good blocking receiver.
Yep.
I think that he had some chemistry with Stafford. You could tell that they couldn't go up tempo at all that game because every time they throw an OBJ, they'd have to huddle because he didn't know what was going on fully. I think that played into it as well. So that was probably a big reason for it. But getting onto this game and the defense, it's definitely the defensive line, no doubt about it. Fred Warner has been fantastic. Also at middle linebacker, really the linebacking core. Although Azeez Al-Shaair is probably still out for the 49ers with a sprained knee, that's a big miss. Dre Greenlaw sounds like will be back. That would be a huge addition for the 49ers. But that front seven altogether really has been the strength of it. Bosa is double teamed, chipped almost every single play. I think he leads the league in being double teamed. Yet he's like 4th or 5th in overall win rate percentage. So that tells you he's taking on a lot of double teams, but he's still winning those double teams, which is insane. And it just allows everybody else to get home. The other big difference that we've seen is stopping the run. So Javon Kinlaw for the 49ers went out early. He was never really right all season long. They didn't know what they were going to do as far as plugging up the middle. They moved Armstead from end. He's not a great pass rusher, but he is good against the run. They moved him from end. They moved him inside next to DJ Jones. And those two have been absolutely incredible together up the middle. Early on in the season, the 49ers were getting gashed up the middle. Whether it was Detroit, Philadelphia, it didn't really matter. There was a lot of open holes for those other teams. That has not happened since Armstead moved inside. That's kudos to him. And then guys like Ebukam and Arden Key, those guys are starting to find their home and figure out what it is that they do and bring to this team. So that front seven is definitely the strength for sure.
Yeah, I think PFF has your rush defense ranked 8th and the Rams run offense is ranked 10th. So that'll certainly be a real even-keeled matchup, I think, depending how you subjectively view PFF's ranking system, which is always fun to get into. But yeah, I think that's kind of how this Rams offense runs. I know everyone loves to talk about Matthew Stafford in the past and Cooper Kupp, who we'll end the show here soon, and we'll get into maybe a Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel comparison because that's always fun. But the offense really goes through the run game if they're able to really get that going. I've talked about it so many times, so I apologize to everyone listening. But in 2020, when they ran the ball 30 plus times, they were like undefeated. This year, if they run the ball 25 plus times, they're pretty much undefeated. So when they abandon the run and run it 12 times a game, good things don't necessarily happen, even though they have Matthew Stafford now instead of Jared Goff. So it's going to be huge in that battle. And I've talked a lot about, even when you play good run defenses, you have to still stick with it, even if you're averaging 2.8 yards a clip, because it keeps the defense honest. It makes the defense play physical, and then it'll finally allow something to open up maybe in that fourth quarter when the game is close and you don't throw yourself out of the game in the fourth quarter like they did during those 3-game losing streak. So that'll be a huge matchup. I think the biggest one for me, it's not Matthew Stafford, the mistakes that everyone wants to talk about. It's the run game of the Rams. What do you see for the Niners as the biggest matchup, whether it's Euro versus RD, your D versus RO? How do you kind of view this game from a Niners lens?
Yeah, I think really it comes down to that secondary for San Francisco. Jason Verrett was already out for the season. He did not play in that first game.
Poor guy, man. That guy just cannot stay
He
healthy.
can't. Yeah, it's too bad. I know he was over in with the
Longtime
Chargers when they
Charger.
were in San Diego. Yeah. Great player. I mean, super talented, but yeah, he
Yeah.
can't stay healthy. Manuel Mosley may or may not return. He's our second best corner. He's been out. He was on IR for a few weeks and he hasn't played yet since that time. They've got Jimmy Ward, who we talked about earlier, is
Mhm.
out on the COVID protocol. They've got Dante Johnson, who's another corner out on COVID protocol. And then they have their nickel corner, K'Wan Williams, out on the COVID protocol. So as it stands now, they're going to be in a world of hurt. They need to get at least one of those guys back, preferably two. If I have my choice, it's going to be Jimmy Ward is number one. K'Wan Williams would be number two. That will be the matchup to look out for, is how the secondary, healthy or not, really matches up with now a Odell Beckham Jr. who is fully vibing with Stafford, Cooper Kupp having one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time.
Mhm.
So yeah, for me, that's going to be the matchup to watch is how can they match up. Speaking of secondary, though, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
What the hell happened last week with Ramsey on the field, shoving his teammate in the face? What were your thoughts on that? What were Rams fans' thoughts on that?
Well, if you follow Ramsey at all, even back to his Jacksonville days, you know he is probably one of the most fiery, passionate players in the
Yep.
game, even back to his FSU days. When the
Yep.
guy doesn't give a crap about anyone. He's just not he cares about his teammates, obviously, but he's like, he is gonna, when the helmet is on, he is gonna be full go no matter what. So what happened essentially that was addressed afterwards was there was a miscommunication in the huddle, and then it was between him and Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp had the wrong assignment. He basically told him in the huddle, you need to do this, this, and this. He didn't do that. So then that's when the altercation kind of occurred. And obviously you don't want to see a player punch your own teammate. Long term, I'm not worried at all. I know afterwards, McVay, the reporter asked, McVay literally asked the reporter, do you have brothers? Have you ever fought with your brothers? I know that's like such a cliche answer for a lot of teammates in general, because they're all brothers and they fight and whatnot. For me, the only concern for me was in that game. I'm not worried at all long term, but in that game, watching after it happened, Taylor Rapp was tentative the rest of the game. Like, you could see him not being fully immersed in what the defense was doing because he had that in the back of his mind. There was an awkwardness on the sideline. They didn't sit next to each other on the sideline. They weren't in the huddle together, really. So it certainly affected the game, and luckily it didn't cost them the game because the defense played primarily pretty well. Luckily, they were going up against Tyler Huntley and not Lamar Jackson. But if that were to happen, say, in this game, or say in the first round of the playoffs against a playoff team, that could really have repercussions in how that player performs if their own teammates in their own head on what they're doing and thinking too much. So, answer your question, I'm not concerned at all long term if it doesn't happen again, but definitely seeing how it unfolded during the game and seeing the play of Taylor Rapp after, a little bit concerning and not something you want to see happen between teammates and between brothers in the middle of the battle.
Yeah, definitely not. And Ramsey to me is one of those guys, right? And you take the good with the bad. I just at some point, and the Rams are a lot like the Chiefs, right? They'll take on some question marks, and they'll take on a lot of question marks. And at some point, there's a tipping point. I'm not saying this is it or whatever, but my eyes perked up at that one. I'm like, okay, like, is this going to be a thing? Is Ramsey going to be this way? What if they're in a playoff game, like you said, third quarter, they're down 10, things aren't going well? How's he going to react, right? Like, you want those high character guys, and Ramsey is a gamer. I don't think he's a bad kid. I think he's just a uber competitive guy, and sometimes to his detriment, and sometimes it's worth it, and sometimes it isn't. So,
Yeah.
had to get your thoughts on that one for sure. The
Yeah.
other question I have for you, real quick.
Real quick before you ask it,
Stafford.
let me just
Okay,
let me,
yeah.
I want your question, but just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
the difference with Ramsey, I think that is on the good side, is that super high character guy. After following him and covering here in Los Angeles, like what he does in the community, what he does outside the field. So some of those guys that have character to do stuff on the field also have character concerns in the locker room and outside.
Sure.
Huge locker room guy, leader, captain, great in the community. His one thing, and it's all about controlling emotion. He is such a perfectionist, kind of like what you talked about Kyle Shanahan as a coach, that sometimes those emotions get rolled over and he does stupid stuff like that. Now, I don't think it'll ever have a long-term detriment just because of how well loved he is and how much of a leader he is. but it's definitely something to watch and get reined in, because I think it was against you guys, actually, when you could see him literally chewing out his defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, because of how things are not working well. But he's like a coach on the field. He's so smart and so cerebral and demands perfection, and he just lets us boil over. But luckily, the character is not an issue whatsoever. He's a great human being, great in the community, similar to kind of like a Richard Sherman, right? Who was a great person in the outside of the field, just had those uber competitive moments that is like, come on, guy, what's going on? But anyway, I just wanted to throw that
No,
in there.
I feel no, that's a great comparison. I agree with you on the Sherman comparison as far as kind of the type of person they are and player they are. That's a great comparison. All right. So full season of Stafford. He had a stretch recently where he threw 5 picks in 51 attempts. Up and down. We know that he never really had the opportunity in Detroit to show that he was a winner, but you know, for all intents and purposes, he hasn't played well in those moments, the small moments that we've seen there in Detroit. And you've seen the second half of the season, once the games, the importance and all that is ramped up, he has struggled a bit. So are Rams fans feeling better about him than they are about Goff? What is their overall sense with Stafford after a full season? And what do they expect from him come the playoffs?
It's funny. Rams fans, I think, are literally like 50-50 split. Like, you have the Goff apologists that are like, what's the difference? Like, we're not getting any. I think here's the thing. If it would have been like, cut Goff and just sign Stafford, I think everyone would be on board. Like, okay, you know what? Yeah, there's been some bad stuff. But the fact that they had to trade 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff for him, there was an expectation that there was going to be these differences in these big-time moments among fans. And I believe there has been, which I'll get into in a second. But I think that's what's met them with the criticism of like, well, here we are. Yeah, 5 pick sixes or whatever it's been, like fumbled in the red zone against Baltimore also. So 3 turnovers in back-to-back games. We ended up winning both those games somehow. But what is the difference between him and Jared Goff at this point? One, the big difference is he's doubled his touchdown output. You know, he's going to throw for over 40 if he gets 2 in this game against the Niners, where Goff had 20 last week. The difference too, and point number 2, is that when Goff had those type of games, and this is no disrespect to Jared Goff, I always talk very highly of him, but there's just a different talent level there. When Jared Goff had these type of games, a la Miami in 2020 or the Niners in 2020, when the bad got bad, that was it. Game over, sayonara, sign off. In that 3-game losing streak, Stafford was kind of the same way. And so, to the credit of those fans who were very critical, it was very similar against the Titans. Threw pick 6 and 2 picks right off the bat. They could never climb out of it. Against the Niners, threw a pick 6 and 2 picks, could never climb out of it. Against the Packers, they came back a little bit, but the Packers are just the Packers, and they were just too good to really overcome that. Since then, though, in these last 2 weeks against the Vikings and Baltimore, granted, probably not the same caliber, but still 2 teams playing for their playoff lives. Same thing, really bad. But then when it mattered most in that game, not the entire game, but in that game in the second half, against Baltimore specifically, 14 for 14, 8 for 8 in the fourth quarter, led his team in a 2-minute drive for a game-winning touchdown with a 4th down conversion to OBJ. So the difference is there, where he's bringing something different to the field that Goff never was able to. Now, we need to see it in the playoffs, because that's been his big MO, 0-3 in the playoffs. I think we will see that, and a lot of it's going to come down to Sean McVay and his play calling too, and like I mentioned earlier, sticking to the run. And you mentioning the deficiency at corner and the secondary for the Niners, that scares me, because I see McVay licking his chops and saying, I want to throw the ball 50 times today, because they're deficient secondary, and that is not what they need to do. And he's a lot smarter than I am. That's just my opinion. So, long answer for your question. Fans are split, but overall, it has been a better product. You know, when a guy throws, even though he has 15 touch interceptions right now, that's been his whole career. I mean, he averages 11 to 17 touchdowns his whole career. You know you're going to get that gunslinger mentality, but he does need to clean it up. But luckily, they have the defense. The special team has come on as of late. They're able to kind of carry him to that. And I think this team is really primed for a good run if he can play to his potential and play to that potential in the 3rd and 4th quarter, which he has the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is between him and Goff, obviously, talent level, right? You see it. The ball flies off of his hand. He makes throws that not many quarterbacks, period, can make.
Yeah.
Falling backwards, off platform. I mean, he makes throws that when Mahomes makes them, they're all over SportsCenter. When Stafford makes them, or has been making them his whole career, you don't ever really hear about it because he played for Detroit, right? Like, he's now now getting some of that shine. And to your point, he's had multiple 3 turnover games, and they still found a way to win. There's no way with a Jared Goff type of player that they're winning a game where Jared Goff throws 3 interceptions. Like,
Exactly.
it's not possible. But because he's so dynamic, he can overcome it. I agree with you. It's definitely an upgrade. Was it worth what they gave up? Well, if they go to the Super Bowl, then it was definitely worth it.
Yeah,
If they don't, well, all right, now it's open for discussion. So a lot of
exactly.
pressure on Stafford, a lot of pressure on McVay and the Rams for sure.
Exactly. And to your point, when they said that they were able to overcome his turnovers and win, people will say, well, what's the difference? Like, okay, well, we won in spite of him, not because of him. Yes, but he also did things down the stretch that helped you win. Last year, the Rams had the number 1 defense in the NFL, and they still lost those games when Goff had those. This year, they have a lesser defense, but they're winning those games with complementary football and with him coming to play in the clutch. So we'll see, though. I mean, you got to beat the Niners, and this team has not been able to do it. So let's wrap it with this, Jesse. All the marbles in on this one. Niners need this one. Do you think they get it done? It's at SoFi. I live here. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's going to be a lot of Niner fans there. A lot of Niner fans reside here in Los Angeles. This is a fact. So it's going to be a really fun, neutral, energetic crowd, I think. How do you think the Niners do, and do you think they get it done?
Well, I have to know what is going on injury-wise with the Rams. Any big injuries? I know that sounds like Akers might be back, but
Yeah.
just overall injury-wise, COVID-wise, what does that look like over there for the Rams?
So at this point, at the time that's recording, they're actually pretty damn healthy. Brian Allen, who played last week, obviously at center, he's good to go still. Nothing re-injured there. Nick Scott, who's a big special teamer, comes in as safety in the rotation. Did break his thumb, but they're clubbing it up. He's apparently good to go, so he'll play with that club. And Cam Akers, last interview with Sean McVay on Monday, said he expects him to go this week and wants him to play. Sony Michel is the starter at running back, but Cam will get his legs and his feet wet for the playoffs, and hopefully they'll be able to use him in a dynamic way. Outside of that, though, I mean, they're pretty offensive line is pretty healthy. Receiving core is all healthy. Everyone's pretty much off the COVID list that was on it. Now, obviously that can change, but this is probably the most healthy the Rams have been going into a Week 18 game that you can hope for in a really big time matchup.
Yeah, and to be fair, we're recording on Tuesday, so a lot can happen, but that's good to hear. I mean, you always want teams at full strength. I'm happy for Akers. When that whole thing happened, man, I was devastated for him. Young kid trying to get his career together, looked to be promising, and what a tough break. So I'm glad that he's back somehow before the season's over. That's incredible for him and for the Rams team. To answer your question, we'll see what happens with these COVID protocols, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, all those players are vaccinated. They have 5 days to get a couple negative tests in. They could all still play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who's going to play at quarterback. I imagine it's Trey. Could be Jimmy. Who knows? All of that said, I can't see the 49ers doing it again to the Rams. I can't. They've won, 5 straight against the Rams?
Yeah.
I can't. Like, this team is way too talented to lose another game to the 49ers when it's so important for the Rams. I know it's important for the 49ers. Obviously, when you get in, lose, they still have a chance, depending on what the Saints do, whether they tie or lose or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Rams are the better team. I think this is their chance to make a statement. I mean, what a better way for Sean McVay to get over the Shanahan hump than to do it in the worst possible time for San Francisco. Obviously, I'm rooting for the Niners to win. I want the Niners to win. I just don't see it happening. I said after they lost to Tennessee, the 49ers, that is, that worst case scenario was going to play out. They would beat the Texans, lose to the Rams. The Saints would lose to the Dolphins, win against Carolina, win against the Falcons. And because of that, the 49ers would miss the playoffs. I'm sticking to it. Everything's played out that way so far. No reason to change my mind. I hate to say it, Niner fans. I just don't see the 49ers making it in. I'll say this as well. I think it would be super fitting if Jimmy Garoppolo plays, they lose the game, and they rode out on Jimmy Garoppolo, expecting that he would make them win that game and go to the playoffs. He loses it. I think it would just be a poetic ending to a season that they should have played Trey the whole way anyways. I'm going with the Rams to win. I think it'll be close. I'll go something like, I think it'll be low scoring. I think it'll be low scoring. I think both these defenses are good. I'll go 24-21 Rams.
Yeah, both are good. I think the Rams are PFF rated 1 and the Niners are 5. So both very good, again, according to PFF, and actual statistics are right around those as well. Yeah, man, I agree with you. And it goes down to what you said, winning 5 straight. And what is on the line for the Rams? Again, we know what's on the line for the Niners too. And I don't want to sound homerish, but with the 5-game winning streak, with everyone pretty much being healthy, with what Matthew Stafford's, the poor play, him trying to prove himself, with McVay really needing to prove himself against Shanahan just to get the monkey off his back there, with the chance to have a home game, with the chance to, not have to play the Niners again in the first week if they were to lose. I just think that there's a lot riding on this game, and the Rams are going to treat this like a playoff game, and which both teams are. Let's be real. But I just think that they have the talent to do it and the talent to get it done, and hopefully they'll stick to what they're good at and not go outside of that framework. And I think they get the win too at SoFi. And ride Jimmy's career off into the sunset like an Edgar Allan poem, depressing and dark.
That's the other thing too, is there's no way. And if it happens, hats off to the Niners. I would be happy to see it. I just can't imagine that the Rams are going to let them come in and just run the ball like that. I think they're going to sell out, do whatever it takes to stop the run. And whether it's a rookie quarterback in a very pressure situation on the road, or it's Jimmy G, who's prone to mistakes anyways, but add in a thumb injury, they're going to make one of those guys win the game on their arm. And I'm reluctant to think that either of those guys would do it at this point against a Jalen Ramsey type player with an Aaron Donald, if that running game is not cooking. So that's ultimately why I think that the 49ers lose. I think that they just don't have enough firepower at the quarterback position as it sits right now for them to pull this one out.
Yeah, and last point on that, I brought up earlier how Jalen Ramsey was like chewing out our defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, during that game. And part of that is because how they use Jalen differently, which has worked in some regards, using him in that star position, moving him all over the field. But in that game, the player killing us was Deebo Samuel. And I think Jalen Ramsey was saying, put me on Deebo. We cannot stop this guy. Put me here. Well, I would expect this game, they put him on Deebo Samuel, and you either let Jordan Fuller or one of the safeties guard George Kittle, which is no easy task either. But I think they've done a better job in that regard. So since that game, and the Packer game was right after that, Raheem Morris has changed his tune a little bit and how he uses Jalen Ramsey. And I think the defense has exponentially gotten better. So that should hopefully help in their regard in that form. So, Jesse, you're the man. I appreciate you coming on. Let me ask you one last question before getting you off here.
Yeah.
Who's the better receiver, Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel?
Oh,
give it to me straight, no chaser.
Yeah, no, pure receiver, Cooper Kupp. I mean, he's got better hands. He's a more pure route runner. Better player, Deebo Samuel.
Okay.
Deebo Samuel, you just talked about Ramsey. Deebo Samuel's going to get his. He may not get it receiving. He's going to go in the backfield and he can rush for 60 and a couple touchdowns on you, right? So he's just, he's an X factor. He is an all-around football player. He has a nasty streak to him. There's a reason that his name is Deebo, and that's what he goes by, because he plays every bit of that. I just think he's a difference maker. And again, Cooper Kupp is one of those players. The 49ers weren't able to do it in the first game, but Saleh pinpointed him when he was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers and said, if we remove Cooper Kupp, we win the game. That was his style, and he did a great job of doing that. As a receiver, you can get taken out of a game. You double team them, do whatever. You have a lockdown corner that you trust. You can take receivers out of the game. Deebo, no matter what, cannot be taken out of the game because he can run. They can line him up anywhere. He's such a great blocker. He just does everything. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Deebo's a better football player. Kupp is certainly the better, more pure receiver.
I can agree. That's well said. I think that's a good way to break it down. So, and a good way to end the show. Jessie Naylor, Last Second Sports on YouTube. Make sure to give him a like and follow there. Does all 49ers for Sports Illustrated, brother. I appreciate you, man. Great catching up and chatting. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, brother. You have a good one.
You too. Good luck this weekend. There he goes. Thank you to my guy, Jesse. Hope you guys all enjoyed that. A lot of great stuff in there. A lot of great tidbits about this rivalry. And I love it too, because on Twitter, not that we've ever had this, or I try to say this in general, but I think on Twitter, you see a lot of times, like actual like content creators too. Not necessarily like journalists, because usually they all work for some entity together. So like, the writer for the Athletic Niners and the Athletic Rams, Jordan Rodriguez, like they're not going to get in a tiff. But you see a lot of time with podcasters and YouTubers and anyone else creating content for their teams. Like there's sometimes some stuff that goes on between those. Some of it's all fun. Some of it gets a little nasty. But you can see when you have conversations with people, like the mutual respect that you have for each team, you can really peel back what this rivalry means, why certain things happen, why the Niners have had the Rams numbers for 5 straight games. And you can get into that and dig into it. I think we were able to do that and have a great conversation. Hope you all enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun. I was planning for that to be about 20 minutes. We went like 50. That's just one of those conversations you're just going to keep rolling. That's why I'm not built, I think, for radio. I do my radio show on Friday, which I love. Shout out to AM 1090, the Mightier. But I'm not built for that to be, in a corner of time constraint. Because, radio show, like my radio show, it's 42 minutes. I do 2 21-minute segments on Fridays. And like I have to hit those by the second. And like I said, I love it. Love being on 1090. It's giving me a great avenue of distribution. Can reach a lot more listeners and ears. So I'm not talking bad about it, but I think I'm built more for just the true podcast and YouTube platform where, hey, I was planning 20 minutes with Jesse. We went for almost an hour because the conversation was just great. So you guys would be the only ones that stop me from doing that. You would say, hey, you talk too long. Like you got to cut it to 20. Then it's like, okay, I mean, you guys are the boss. You're my boss. So I'd have to then cut it to 20, but hopefully that's not the case. Hit me up below in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed it. What's your thoughts on the game? Give me some score predictions. Love to chat with you. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. Chat me with you there whenever. Always love talking to you guys. Such a pleasure. I love doing this. Make sure to check out LAFBnetwork.com for plenty more Rams, Chargers, Trojans, Bruins content. I was just on our Bruins podcast, Bruin Bible, with my guy Will last night, talking about the Dylan Gabriel news, potential Caleb Williams news. So check out that podcast. We got the new Salute to Troy podcast with former Trojan Alfred Rowe. Dropped his first episode a few weeks ago. He's coming out with episode 2 this week. Obviously, got the Rams Brothers podcast and Chargers Unleashed. So we got it all on the LA Football Network, and we're just getting started. 2022 is going to be huge for us in this network and for Los Angeles football, as we want to be the home place for you fans in the city of Los Angeles. For too long, football fans in LA have been pushed to the wayside for Lakers and Dodgers, and the LA Football Network, put you first. Sorry, I'm ranting. I'm passionate about it. And I think what we're building is, I'm just proud of it. And I think we have really cool stuff coming. So Super Bowl is here in like a month and a week. We just got approved credentials to be on Radio Row. So the LA Football Network will be on Radio Row in Los Angeles at the Super Bowl. Come on. Poetry. Ralph Waldo Emerson couldn't have written it better. Born to be there. Anyway, going on too long. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Ryan Dyrud. This is the LA Football Show. Enjoy your week. We'll be back Friday, 5 o'clock. See y'all there. I'm out. Peace.